Hey, church family, welcome back to the FBC Durant podcast. I'm Garrett.
I'm Corey.
I'm Sarah, and today we have Kanda Forbis with us. She's going to be sharing a little bit about her story, her grieving process, and also a children's book that she has recently written. And we are just so grateful and thankful that you have come on to the podcast to share your story. And it really is encouraging to me for you to be here and to talk about this and be vulnerable with us. So I just want to say thank you for that. And then just give you a little bit of a chance to share about yourself, your family, and your story.
All right, so I'm Kanda. I'm born and raised here in Durant and went to Durant High School. I was actually baptized in First Baptist when I was 15. So definitely like a hometown girl. I have a husband named Sean, and we have two sons, Bowman and Jackson. And so like a little bit about my story. November 11th of last year, Bowman was ran over by a trailer at our house by a family member. And I was in the house with Jackson, and you just like in a moment, your whole world has changed. And that's really kind of, how everything has went since then. You just kind of figure out how to navigate life after that. One thing that I was told pretty early on is that when you have a loss so hard, and I know you probably know, it's like you can still survive somehow, but it's like losing an arm, and they're like, it's like an amputation. Everything's different. Like it changes how you breathe at times. Like it's crazy how much life changes when you lose or have a loss to that magnitude, for which I'd never gone through before. Like I've never experienced grief. And I think, probably like everybody, you haven't until you have, and then you just have to live it. So that's kind of where we're at now. But.
And then do you want to share just a little bit about Bowman?
Yeah. So Bo was 4 years old, 1 month and 13 days, and he was the little like wildest, fearless little boy. He was so smart, which often got him into a lot of trouble. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. That boy, he knew how to push my buttons. And I think that was one of the things that, looking back now, I think I made that mistake of praying for patience with him, because man, did I ever. He tested me, but my husband always said it's because you two are just alike. Like, so it's funny now with Jackson, I'll start to feel myself get like frustrated if he doesn't want to go to sleep or the things like that. And then just like instantly I can hear him breathe, and just a peace comes over me. And I'm like, I'm so blessed to be a parent. And like this loss has really taught me that. But yeah, Bo was just getting into dirt bike racing. So that we'll talk a little bit about later, but that's what the book is about. It's called Finish Your Race. And since Bo was 2 years old, he started racing Stasics, which are like battery-powered bikes. And I'm not even going to begin to say how fast they go, but I want to say in like the 12 to 15 mile an hour range. So he started that when he was 2, going into 3, and then he raced those, and he actually raced his first like motocross race when he was 3. So we went to Dallas, and it was so hot, and my little boy, it was a wobblers class, and he was truly a wobbler. And he got out there, and I thought I was going to have a heart attack that day, but he was fearless. Like that was just what he did every day. We built a track in the backyard. We have a farm out of town, and that was his place. He was there every day, just ran that track. But yeah, that's Bo.
What were you doing when you were 3 years old, Garrett?
Not that. I was literally I was wobbling around, just walking.
I was not exactly. I was trying to develop basic motor skills. That's impressive that he's just on an actual motorized vehicle.
Yeah, it's impressive.
That is,
really.
Yeah, that's impressive. All right,
That's cool.
That's awesome. And so, well, Kanda, you've clearly gone through something that I think no one would wish on anyone. And obviously you use the word grief. And there's a book that I really love. It's only like 80 pages long, but it's by C.S. Lewis, and he wrote a book when his wife died. And it's very much him. It's very candid. It's very like him having a lot of questions about why God would show him his wife and then take her just like a few years later and stuff. And it's very sobering. And I think I think it's very good for when people go through grief. It's very, very brave to hold the microphone, be on camera, and talk about grief, because that's very hard, but it's so helpful for people. I myself, I have stress dreams about losing my parents. I prep for grief, because I've never actually lost anyone real close. I've never been through that, but obviously I assume my parents will not outlive me, and so I prep for that. And so I would love to know what your journey through grief has kind of been like. What does that look like for you?
So like, they talk about the stages of grief, and they talk about how you, we were always told you don't get through step 1 and go to step 2. You may go from 1 to 5 to 3 to 2 and back to 1 again. I feel like we've definitely experienced that, but when you have faith, and like, I think if I hadn't had that, I wouldn't have anything, because knowing like where Bo's at, it's like I have him on the other side of the earth. Like, I kind of compare it to being just like he's on a different continent. Like, I know he's there, and so like I'm able to process my grief, pretty well because of that. I don't know what life would be like on the other side of that. So I feel like I'm very blessed with that. But as far as grief, like, I've just been able to have my support system. And like, I know when I have a bad day, like I kind of carry my emotions on my sleeve. Like they can see it, but they just know, like, sometimes it doesn't take saying anything. Just sitting. And I think of like Job and his friends, they were pretty productive for him at first. They just sat there quietly. And actually had an experience like with that last night. A friend or a family member has just lost somebody, and she was having a hard time. And I asked my other family members, like, can I come over and just sit? And so I did, and I sat there, and she's like, you'd probably be the best person to come sit with her. And I was like, okay. So I said at first, can I come talk with her? And then I got there, and there's just no words. Like, sometimes when you're in the pits of it, sitting is the only thing and the best thing that you can do. And so we did that, and I just kind of talked her through the breathing episodes that or not episodes, but exercises that I learned in therapy. So we did grief therapy, and I am a big supporter of that. But just kind of talked through those things, and then just sitting, because like, you can't fix it. You can't change anything. You're not going to bring that person back. And I've gone through that. It's like, I'm not going to say like I've had everything I've ever wanted in life, but I have had everything I've ever really wanted out of life. Like I've been blessed in a lot of ways. And so when I've lost Bowman, it's like the one thing that you want that you can't get. Like, no amount of money, no amount of work, nothing's going to bring him back. And so like, that was one thing that I really struggled with, that I've had to just learn how to live with. It's kind of like that arm again. Like, you just kind of learn as time goes on, and then you have the faith that you're going to see him again. And so that's kind of what my journey's been like. It's been really encouraging to stay so focused, like so focused on where he's at.
All right. Kanda, Corey mentioned earlier just how much your story and explaining your story is helpful to people. And you even mentioned briefly like breathing exercises. What are some things that you found get you through the days, whether it's day by day or whether it's a big moment? What are some things that maybe you practice or you've learned about yourself that really help?
So I've just like stayed focused on the book, like honestly picking up a project has really helped me. It's maybe busied my mind. And I also felt like it was an obedience calling from God to like share our story too. So like honestly through that, just writing and even things I know, like I've been told through counseling, like journal. Just to be honest, like I haven't journaled very much. I'll look at my journal and be like, last dated March. And I'm like, okay, it's not March anymore. But I've posted like on Facebook. So like I feel like I'll take time to like write things out and like notes on my phone and like gather my thoughts. And then I'll be like, okay, I want to share this. I remember doing that when it came to Christmas. I had this note on my phone that was pretty lengthy for a long time. And I don't even know, but it got a lot of shares. But it was basically just about like how God gave his son away. And like having just lost Bowman, I was like, I couldn't fathom that. So like it really put it into so much perspective. Like he gave his son to us for that. Like he gave his son's life away like that. And it was just mind blowing to me at that moment going through it. But like writing it out helped me process my grief. And then sharing it felt like a call of obedience to God. Like people need to hear this. Maybe it's going to be inspiring faith in others. And I feel like with our situation, it's like kind of gotten a lot of like local attention just because, I mean, he was a 4-year-old little boy and these things are shocking for a small town. And I mean, it's shocking for us for sure. But that's been my way. And then like we talked about with the breathing exercises, like if I'm having, like I have anxiety, not to like a major point, but like I do have mild anxiety and I'll just sit and cry. And like, if I need to cry, just let it out. And then in a little bit, I'll just start praying and then doing like they call it like box breathing. So I'll do that and I can like start to feel better again in the moment. It's different for like everybody. I mean, the way I grieve isn't going to be how the person next to me grieves, and we may be grieving over the same person. Just like the way my husband is grieving for his son. I mean, we lost Bowman. We're both his parents. And it's been a learning process for us. Like, if I think that he may need me to hug him, but really he just needs space. Like, he may go for a run. And so, like, it's really learning how to communicate what you're needing in that moment. And we've really learned that through therapy. Like, honestly, we've never been challenged before, like not like that, obviously. And so, but he's also poured his heart into racing again. He raced as a kid and through high school and stuff like that. So dirt bike racing. And this season, he's raced all of the races this season. We're currently like in the thick of it in September. It'll finish up at the end of October. And I mean, he's not winning it. I think he's like maybe top 5. I told him he needs to go faster. But it's just been so therapeutic for him to just be doing something he's felt like he's carrying Bowman with him. So like whatever that is, like me writing Bowman's story, I just feel like that's been so helpful just because I feel like for one, like I said, like an obedience to God, but also sharing Bowman with the world who otherwise they don't know him. And unfortunately, with him being so young, he hadn't even started preschool yet. So like, I was so looking forward to that. That was probably one of the things that you don't realize in grief, that you're going to have to go through those steps. Like when you lose Bowman, like you lose your bedtime routine, like you lose the cuddles and the things. But I don't think initially that I thought that I would lose his first day of school. And that was horrible for me. And I think like with writing, or with not necessarily writing, but with the book, maybe that's why that's the direction I went, is because that was our thing. Like racing and was Sean's thing with Bo. They did that together. They practiced together. But for me, every night before bed, we read. And like, it's funny that I wrote a children's picture book because we ditched those when he was 2 years old. Or maybe even before, we started reading, honestly, we started reading the Harry Potter illustrated books.
That's cool.
And we've read 1 through 4, and we're quarter way through book 5. And that little 4-year-old's vocabulary was amazing. Like,
Let's say it's
yeah.
so smart.
So it's just like, that was one of the things for me to like write something that parents can do with their children, what I did with Bo every night. So that was helpful. I mean, that was one of the things that got me through it the first year. I'm trying to figure out what my next project is, honestly.
Yeah, that's cool. Something you said that was so helpful to me just sitting in this moment was, whether it's grief or just struggling through something, giving, whether it's a married couple or friends, giving each other space to process like they need to. Tawny, thank you, Tawny. She allows me sometimes to go outside and shoot hoops for a while to kind of decompress. And, you know, it's one of those things that may sound silly in your head, but like everyone's unique in the way that they're working through things, and giving each other space to kind of breathe and do what they need to do to kind of ground themselves and just think through things, being still, you know, being still before the Lord can look like different things to different people. And that's really good. Anything you guys would add to that and how you maybe cope with things that could be helpful?
I was thinking while you were talking, I lost my dad almost a year ago, and me and my sister both lost our dad. We lost our dad to depression, so just like been really just like a traumatic time, and just a lot of like things you have to go through, you know, after when you're dealing with grief. But me and my sister like both lost our dad, like you were talking about your husband. We just grieve so differently, and I do think that's like a hard thing to like understand at first, because like you only can understand your grief, especially at the beginning, because like it's so overwhelming that you don't have, like you can't like try to understand someone else's. But like as I go out and further out, it's just interesting to see that. And like Garrett said, like I think that we all like, it's good to have like grace for one another, like during like the grief process, because it doesn't have to look the same for everyone. Something that's really helped me has been counseling. I think that that's been really good to process, because sometimes you just want to talk about it and talk about like the hardships you have, but you don't really want to necessarily, I mean, I don't necessarily want to just unload that all on Cole at the end of the night, because at the end of the day, he lost someone too, and that's hard. And so I think counseling has been so helpful. I also have been recommended to journal and have not done that as much. But I do think I kind of relate a little bit to like the sharing, just sharing with people, and just knowing that like I haven't gone through grief in vain. And that, like, you know, when other people reach out and have gone through a similar situation, or just hurting, like, it's just a reminder to me that, like, we don't go through stuff like this for no reason. I read a book called "Suffering is Never for Nothing." Have you ever read it? Anybody? It's really great. It's by Elizabeth Elliot. I'm almost 100% sure. Don't fact check me, but that book was really good for me. So just doing some different things like that. And of course, you know, for someone else, reading a book might not be very helpful for them in their grief process, but that was really helpful for me. And then, of course, scripture, I feel like has been really helpful, just to like say to myself in times where I feel like Satan has really taken over my thoughts. So if you don't mind sharing, maybe some scripture that has helped you during your grief process, or really anything like of that nature.
So one of, obviously, well, I guess it's maybe not obvious because people haven't got the book yet, but the book is actually written to where Philippians 3:14 is the moral of the story, and it's, I press on to reach the end of the race and receive the heavenly prize for which God through Christ Jesus is calling us. Anything with a race reference is, you know, sweet. I feel like that's just like a little touch for Bo. There's Acts and Hebrews. I actually have a copy of some of those scriptures in the book here. in my copy. Hebrews, let us run with endurance the race God has set before us. And then Acts, I consider my life worth nothing to me. My only aim is to finish the race and complete the task the Lord Jesus has given me, the task of testifying the good news of God's grace. So Romans, testing and endurance. And, Gary did the sermons over First Peter. The trial sharpens us. I mean, nobody chooses this. But I can see so much growth in my faith since November. And really clinging to those scriptures has shown me that, like you said, this isn't in vain. This isn't for nothing. There is good coming from this. I hate the circumstance. Like, I hate that we have sin that's brought death into this world. But that's just the way it is. But thank God that we have Jesus and that this battle is won. It's just a matter of us getting to that, finishing the race, if you will. So that's literally what our kind of motto has been when we have those hard days. I actually got a tattoo on my arm that says press on, because that's that Philippians 3:14 is press on to finish the race. And when I have those hard moments, like, I'm just reminding myself constantly to press on, because the battle is won in the end. We just have to get there. Mm-hmm. So it's always an encouragement to go to those scriptures for me. I know everybody has their own. And then just to keep focus on the things that are eternal.
Yes.
Helps,
Very helpful.
Something you said, like, we had an opportunity to sit down before this and meet and just discuss a little bit, and that was such an encouragement as well. But one of the first things you said that was so impactful to me was, you said shortly after, you guys had a quick decision. Like, what are we going to do? We're going to run from the Lord, and your resolve to say we're going to cling to the cross, like, immediately, was so impactful to me that was kind of like, that's what we have to do. How has that decision or outlook influenced your life moving forward, maybe your marriage, family? How has that maybe changed anything?
So before, I was a believer, but my husband was not saved. And so in December, our bug man, shout out Nelson, he came to exterminate one day. Let's go. And, he told Sean all about the gospel, and here we are. So you never know who God's using in your lives.
That's
truly.
A new story to me. That's incredible.
Yeah. So obviously with Sean being like a new believer, it's really shifted our whole marriage. Like before we've had marital problems in the past, and God knew what we were headed towards. So like, we stayed through it, even though he wasn't at the center at the time. But now, like, we know where our focus is, and it's just putting like our marriage into that perspective of like putting Christ first is what's going to get us through these difficult times. Cause like, otherwise I don't think we would have. And I've never actually looked up the statistics, but they're pretty bad from what I've been told about the divorce rates in for parents that have lost a child. So like, without that firm foundation, like, where would we be? And so we've told ourselves, like, we were made for this moment. However unfortunate it is. And so like, we're just making the most of that and keeping our focus.
You've referenced it several times, but we want to check out the book. If you would, just share about the book, what it's about, maybe the message. You've kind of mentioned it, but now we can focus on more the message you would want people to walk away with once reading the book. Just share that with us.
So with the book, I'm trying to figure out how to start this story. So the book was actually written about one of Bowman's races. I just looked, and it was May 6th of 23. And Bowman was like first place at the time. So he was doing great. He was going around the track, and I was actually big and pregnant with Jackson. It was somewhere Texas that it was literally just Sean and I watching him. So like there wasn't any other family there at that race. And Bo was winning and he was doing great and he was passing by. And then I noticed the next lap, the girl behind him, the boy behind her, like these other kids who were second, third, fourth, or whatnot place were passing. And I was like, oh, where's my child? And my big pregnant self starts running across the track. And I fell. I didn't actually fall all the way down, but I have a scar on my foot, which is like its own little cool tattoo.
Yeah.
But so went and found Bowman. And when I got there to Bo, Sean had already picked him up and put him back on his bike. I learned that he had wrecked into a hole, and front tire went into a hole, and his little body, he was 3, his little body went over the handlebars of this bike. Mind you, it's at least not a dirt bike. It's that battery bike, so it makes maybe a little bit better. But he went over the bike and was crying. The race official actually took his bike off the track and was like, that kid is done. There's no way he's going to get back up and finish. But it was the last lap. And, you know, at the time, Bowman was actually in the standings. So it goes like season standings. Okay. He's in the standings for like first, second place. Like he was kind of teetering it. And Sean's thinking, competitive parents for 3-year-old racing. Yeah. But Sean's thinking is, you better get back up and finish this race. You started it. You need to finish it, buddy. Yeah. And so Bo's crying and he's like, fine. So he takes off, goes through checkered flag, finishes his last lap. And we're so proud of him. Like I talked about that story for weeks at work and just anybody who would listen, just parent brag moment. Okay. And then when it came to, obviously at the season's end, Bowman actually won the championship for his season. His last race was on his 4th birthday or that weekend. So it was so cool. We had a big like celebration. There's actually a page in the book that is family. Like I had the illustrator, I sent pictures of the family who made it to that race and things like that. So that's pretty cool. But then the awards banquet was in January of this year. So we lost Bo in November. So we actually accepted his championship trophy for him, and it was really hard. Yeah. But it was so inspiring. And honestly, like when we were gathering information for the service, I remember like Kevin, the guy who did the service, he's like, well, what do you want me to say? So I'd handed him a book, and this is funny too. I'd written a book, just kind of journaled the funny things Bowman would say. Cause like I said, he had a big vocabulary. The kid was funny. But I would journal the little funny things he would say. If he'd say it, I'd just write a date and then what he said. And I handed him that book, and I told him I really wanted him to say the finish your race story. And he didn't at the service. And I'm not going to say I was let down by Kevin, because he did an amazing job at the service, but I just felt like God was saying like, this needs to be told. Yeah. And so we're actually pulling up to the graveside service, my husband and I, and Sean was driving us. And I said, Sean, I think I need to tell that story. And he's like, what? I was like, he's like, I'm not talking. For sure, I'm not going to say a word. And I was like, well, I think people need to hear it. And I feel like it's really heavy on my heart that this has to be told. And so I don't think I looked anyone in the eyes. I just looked straight up to the sky, and I told that story. And I think Madison Hammock, she told me later, way later. So I feel like it was like fully God, fully Holy Spirit. Like I don't know where that strength came from. But she told me later, she said, you literally said, don't let my son's death not have a purpose. So like the purpose is to encourage all of us to seek the cross. The purpose is to encourage all of us to finish the race, because we're all going to face trials. Like I may have lost Bowman, but honestly, like who knows what's in my future? And we're all going to come across something that's challenging, and we're going to have faith to get through it, or we need the faith to get through it. And then the Finish Your Race, the title of the book is that. So when we were picking out, weirdly enough, t-shirts for the service, someone said, what do you want it to say? And Sean instantly said, finish your race. Mm-hmm. And the person was like, you mean finished his race? Like past tense, like Bowman? And he's like, no, finish your race. This is a call to action. Like, this isn't necessarily about Bowman. It's about us. Like, it's about grief and like us getting through this. We're going to push on. We're going to press on to finish our race now.
That's so good. God's definitely had his hand on that message and needs to continue to spread. If you would show the book, the cover is really cool. But how can people access the book? It's a great book. I would like to share with my kiddos personally.
So we have a book launch here at the Durant Public Library on November 2nd. 10 to 2, I'll have tables set up in the lobby. So there's that. And then I'm going to try to get into like local market things. I think there's a Magnolia Market coming up that we're trying to get a booth in that. So locally, I've actually like self-published this, and I have not yet enabled it for like mass distribution. I don't have a timeline necessarily. I'm thinking maybe in 2025, maybe January, we'll just kind of see how it plays out for the rest of the year on that. But eventually it will be on like Amazon and those things.
Awesome.
Do you think you'll continue writing? Do you think there will be more writing past this? Like, even if you write something nonfiction, more adult type, I mean, just grieving the story, this process.
I think so. It's hard to say. I haven't actually started anything, but I feel like possibly. I definitely feel like it's in my future. And I've even thought like, it's so weird because kind of going back to grieving, I feel like people all have their own ways and then their own hiccups. Like, I felt like getting Bowman's headstone was like a checklist. I had to get that. And we almost jumped right into it. I needed that to be there and set. And so I feel like I could like bury him fully. Like, I didn't feel like those things were complete until that was mounted. And I mean, it took 6 months, but I just always felt something lingering over me. Like, it was unfinished. But then I've met a couple who outwardly I thought, had it all together in a way. And then to learn that years later, they haven't placed their loved one's headstone. Like, that was their hiccup. And then, but my hiccup is that I still have dental floss in my son's bathroom. And it took me 7 months to give Jackson a bath in that bathtub. Like, we all have our thing that may not be so outward. Like, you just don't know how it is for different people. And so I feel like those are just the things that aren't really spoken of that I could write about maybe one day.
That's good.
And is there, just as we kind of move towards the end here, is there anything else that you want to share about his story or about grief, or just anything that we haven't covered yet, just about the journey that you've been on?
One thing that kind of comes to mind is just parenting now. It's still new. I mean, I am by no means an expert, but like I kind of mentioned earlier with Jackson, if I find myself getting frustrated, just feeling so much relief in seeing him breathing it's like a wave of relief. My frustration disappears. And one thing that just the sweetest friends who've dealt with child loss, they're on their 5th year. We were sitting on a mountaintop once, and she's like, this is a side note, but she just said, don't you just feel so much closer to heaven here? And I was like, yes. Like, was the sweetest, most calming moment being there. But she had told me then that after losing their son Ellis, that just to raise your children open-handedly to God. Like, I mean, I don't want to say this out loud really, but there's no guarantees for Jackson. There's no guarantees that I may not have to relive this again, and that, you know, the next person's not going to experience something similar. So it's like, I want to put Jackson in an absolute bubble. Like, it kills me when he got an ant bite the other day. Yeah. And so I'm really struggling, and I know, like, prayerfully, like, I'll get through that. And I see her do that so gracefully, is like raising her children after child loss with an open hand to God, because they're God's children. And we're just blessed with the opportunity to grow them up. And another thing was, like, losing Bowman at such a young age. At the time, like I told you, like, our marriage wasn't Christ-centered. Now, like, I see how urgent it is to grow Jackson up in a Christ-centered family. Because what if he had gotten past that age of accountability? Like, that's one of my strongest comforts for Bo, is to know that he is in the hands of Jesus right now. But, like, if this had happened 10 years from now or whatnot, like, could I confidently say that I'd raised my son with Christ as the center of our household? Had I steward him in that direction? So, like, really putting that urgency on, like, I need to be the kind of parent, and we need to be the kind of parents that puts Christ first in our children's lives.
So Kanda, I can't imagine losing a child. I don't even have a child. And so this has been really encouraging. It's been very sobering to sit and listen to this. And I'm just curious, losing a child at such a young age, like, what's, you know, obviously you've learned a ton through this. And as Garrett just said, this has absolutely not been in vain. Just the actual, like, just restoration of so much going on in your family as a result of just a tragedy. What's it like just preserving the memory of Bo in your day-to-day life? I imagine there's just days where you try to run from grief, but you don't want to run from the memory of your child. And just so, like, what's that like, just preserving that?
So for us, we just love talking about Bowman. One day at work, it was pretty early on. I remember, like, having kind of an anxiety attack at work. And Sean asked me, he said, well, what was different? And I was like, I don't know. He's like, well, did someone bring up Bowman? Like, did someone bring anything up? And I was like, no, actually, it was normal. And he said, I then said, I haven't actually talked about Bowman today. And he said, then that's it. You need to. And I think a lot of times people want to avoid the elephant in the room. And, like, I know I've lost my son. Like, you're not going to remind me. I've not forgotten. And when people do bring him up to me, I'm just like, it's heartwarming, because I'm like, they're thinking about Bowman. Because I think, too, one of the things with him being so young, especially, like, with his cousins and friends, is that they're also 4 years old. They're also 5, 6, 7. Like, are they going to forget him? And that's really hard for me, like, to think of him being forgotten in their minds. Like, I know I'm not going to, and I know, like, my close friends and things, like, they're not going to, but just keeping his memory so alive that they remember him. And actually, the friend that I talked about earlier that lost Ellis, Percy, who is the little girl in the pink, the little racer, that's Percy. She was born actually after Ellis had passed. And I think it's so funny, when Jordan told me about that, I was kind of talking to her about my fears of being forgotten in, like, my nephews and my nieces, or by my nephews and nieces. But she said, Percy will actually argue that she knew Ellis and she was not yet born. Like, they have kept his memory alive so well that her and her older brother, Ira, who was there with Ellis, he was like, you weren't even here. And she said, like, yeah, I was. Like, she knows Ellis so well just because they've kept his memory alive. And so, like, that's what I hope to do as well for Bo. And I want to talk about him. Like, it brings me comfort to do that. We just have so many little clips, and my mother-in-law kept Bowman. So I just have, hundreds of 6 seconds or whatnot, little clips of funny things he did or said. And I also took videos of just random things, like brushing his teeth all the time. Like, which now I just watch for fun. And I videoed one night, and we played this at both service, but sometimes I'd videoed probably when he was 2 to 3. Like I can tell just by age, he was littler. But it was his prayer, like of his bedtime prayer.
Down to the river, fall off.
Okay, let's say our prayers now, Amy.
Now I come to sweet place the Lord, okay.
What's next?
Next,
Fashta.
Fashta.
If I should die.
You said Fashta.
I know it sounded like that. If I should die before we wake.
You said Fashta.
Okay, Bobo. If I should die.
What?
If I should die.
What a dude.
So,
That's awesome.
And then another one, this video, I actually have it on my Bible, in the front of my Bible, and show everybody. Every night before bed, my husband would tell Bo how much, and it was always, how much do you love me? Or like, how much I love you. And they would always go like this much and just make like an L with their hands. And it meant like there's no end to the love. And so every night before bed, it was how much, and it would be this much. And one day, my mother-in-law sent me one of those videos it was like a Snapchat video while I was at work, and it's of Bo basically doing the how much to her. And at the time, she didn't understand. Like, she didn't even know we did that. So that's even funnier. Is it was like so innocent when she videoed it, and now it's like that's the only video we have of how much. So it just means so much to us. But that's this one.
Daddy, do you know how much I love you?
No, how much?
I love you this much.
Just that much?
Yeah. A lot.
A lot?
Yeah. So like, I mean, I know technology has its downfall, but man, sometimes it's great.
You said at the funeral, do not let his death be without any purpose. And God has been faithful in that. I have been extremely encouraged, impacted in our short meetings we've had together. I'm not the same. So thank you for your sharing, your courage to share. As Corey mentioned earlier, we're blessed, and I know that those that are listening are extremely blessed. So thank you so much.
I think that it will mean so much to so many people. I think everyone sitting here has been extremely encouraged by you being here, and by Bowman's story, and by your family's story. And I just see God really working, and it's so encouraging to know that from such tragedy, the Lord can still make beautiful things. Just talking about your husband's salvation and the way it's grown your marriage, and all these beautiful things that have come from something so horrible. And just your obedience in this has been very encouraging to me. Your obedience to be here to talk about this, and just to share, like you said, that's something that really helps you, just to share with everyone about this very hard time in your life and what the Lord's doing. And I think it takes a special person to do that. And obviously the Lord has really gifted you in this, and he has really gotten you through this. So I'm just thankful that the Lord has used this, and I think he's still using it. He's going to continue to use Bowman's life for his glory. So thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.